You all talk about science and art, and my first question is definitely how can connecting art and science contribute to deeper understanding of the universe? Because the subtitle of our panel is Into the Universe. Ariane, can I start with you? Thank you.
I'll take the other one too.
I think, as I said, because it can take us further and beyond our parameters of being and knowing, imagination is kind of created with art and science colliding together. So factual worlds meeting our own intuition, our senses, our feelings, touch, taste, sight, all those sort of things. When we collide with the facts of science, it can take us beyond, as far as we can, outside the human. And it will make us understand the universe much more. I mean, yep.
I think the separation of science and art is rather a mechanical way of looking at the world anyway, because before the Renaissance, we don't really have such a division in our way of building knowledges, like a withered, the witch is also the doctor, the theology is a foundation of science, like fortune telling is probably the study of like the stars. So not to say that we are not having very, very sharpened, honed in way of constructing knowledge. I think science is a particular idea of like how shall we learn as a method of proving and experimentation, hypotheses, and it's just like a structure of how we understand, but it's not like a barrier in terms of like that's totally separate from ourself and the desire to be a human, which I think is more how we reference art in that sense. So I always like want to push back more on the division rather than say, oh, why they have to be together.
I think it's like Ariane talked about, that there is no maybe division between nature and technology, that it's all connected. So I love it. Bettina?
Yes, it's a specific question. When I'm thinking about science, it of course means which kind of science do you mean, which specific field. Maybe I cannot imagine about science like it's something general. Let's say we are talking about universe. I think it's when you think about the universe, it liberates you somehow because you don't focus on yourself. And I think we are really focus on ourselves, and we put a lot of energy into human behavior and sociology. Nothing against it, but I think we are so tiny, and it's so not important for the rest of the universe what we are doing. Maybe yes, but somehow I think for me it's liberating to think about to think about something which is so big and so amazing.
And art can help us understand science, which is very complex and hard to understand for everybody. So we don't think that the Earth is flat.
I will ask afterwards. The world is.
Are you sure?
But Ariane, should we then merge art and science in our education systems, in our curriculums? Should we bring them closer together?
Well, it's close together. For example, in the US, I know a physicist who also is doing their dissertation on dance. So there are ways of making sure that our education systems are not exclusive, that you can do both. And I think traditionally within Europe and the US, they have been kind of separated, not allowed to do all of them. But I do think there's a place for specialism, and I think that's really important as well, because if we start losing specialist knowledge, then we're going down the track of understanding less. I'm just saying we should be doing both at the same time. So I would have loved to have been a physicist, for example, but that was excluded from my school curriculum because it didn't fit in my timetable. So those sort of things shouldn't be happening. Equally, Fabiola Gianotti, who's the Director General of CERN, she had to choose between being a physicist and a concert pianist. Why can't she be both? Why can't society give us even more room within educational systems and beyond?
Shin, we are talking a lot about the distinction between art and technology and science, if there's any. You have experience from very different cultures. You come from China, you studied in the US, you live in the UK. Do you see differences among those different cultures, how they approach it?
Actually, responding to what you're saying, I do see that in certain culture there is, a hierarchy of like, if someone is a specialist, they must be really, really good at something, and then if you are like committed to a study, especially I think in France, the idea of being a doctor is so heavy, but then lots of them don't end up doing what they studied. I think that notion is slightly more loose in the state, and China, I think, is also less an issue to be like originally trained in something and then you have to do this for the rest of your life. But for me, I feel like it is more about whether a person themselves really believe that they can learn. And I always found it incredibly funny, like people just have this like mental block or this belief of who they are simply because you learned something from the year of 18 and to 22, during which you probably for the most of the time you're not really studying that hard anyway. And then like for the rest of your life, let's say 40 years, it'll be like, this is the only thing I can do, I can talk about, I can possibly understand. I think that's just ridiculous. I think for like undergrad at least, you can practically learn everything a college student is learning right now on YouTube. So how are we trapped in that one decision you made when you're like 18? It's just like absurd to like still in that mindset. So I always trying to like encourage friends at any age bracket, in any age bracket, to be like, if you want to learn that, go for it. Google it, YouTube it. It's much easier than we think it is. Yeah.
I will add one statistics I recently saw. Only 12% of people in OECD actually took part of any type of learning or education once they are adults. So there's a very small fraction of people who are actually fascinated by this lifelong learning. And that takes me to an Officina question. How could we actually encourage this curiosity and learning? And I think you're truly great with your projects, kind of fostering curiosity.
Maybe it's I don't know, every person has got it, has got different approach. For somebody it's really like, it's a desire to learn something. For somebody it's not so important, but I'm afraid about one thing. Maybe I'm just going back to your answer, that it's great what you can learn here now. Only thing is that it's like a vertigo, because you never know where to stay, what to really go deep. It's something which can be even somehow you can lose your motivation after some time. This is the danger. On the other hand, it's great. For me, it's great, and I want to learn all the time, even if I'm getting old. But for young people, maybe it can be even like a little bit of like a issue in this way.
I think the most important thing is to not forget to play because through play and experimentation, we can gain the interest to invent and explore.
Thank you. Arian, we have seen, of course, artists taking inspiration from scientists. Have you, in your practice, seen scientists taking inspiration from art?
So only last week, 10 years after he had talked to the composer Carlo Scarlatti, the CERN physicist Nicolas Chanon admitted that had actually run an experiment at CERN following his discussions with her on a particular theory, and he'd based his whole PhD on that discussion with Carlo Scarlatti. So that's an example of an artist bringing another point of view and triggering a new way of looking at the world. So yes, but there's not enough documentation about this. It's all very, very one way. So when I found that out, I was like, wow, there's a really good concrete example. And there needs to be more concrete examples of this.
Perfect. I'm opening to questions for the audience. I do have a lot of questions here, but still. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm still trying to formulate my question, but I actually wanted to go back to your point about social sciences, and maybe if you want to clarify your point a little bit, I'm curious, what's your standpoint on this? Because you're on stage right now because of your, I would say, social innovation, the way that you think. You're thinking outside of a box, you're pushing our collective boundary of our perception and knowledge and opening new ways of thinking. And at the same time, you stated that you don't understand or appreciate, I'm sorry, please just clarify the value of our exploration of also this side of our existence. So I think they're very much in tangent, but I just wanted to hear some clarification on that point. Thank you.
Maybe, sorry, it's it's not easy to express in English because for me it's quite complex thing, but the thing is that we put a lot of effort in I think in society and we look at it from different angles. We've got so many topics about society, about like a human society, but there is still a lot of things to explore outside the human's bubble, and we are not focusing so much energy in this. I mean, on social media, for example, I don't think it's in general, but what I see on social media, we are focusing very much on humans' behavior and I don't know what all these kind of problems which are connected with nationalities and all this how we live in the cities and our environment is, of course, everything is so important, but it's something which really surrounds us and influences us immediately. But there are more things which are like over the horizon, you know, and there's a lot of explore, and I want to, but I don't have maybe opportunity to do that because we are asked for the let's say more simple things, and so I would like to. If I answered your question, was it right?
He looks happy, so I guess. And another question. Shin, our society struggles with trust in science. Do you think art can play a role in changing this trend? And I'm asking you because one of the Slido questions is about flat earthers, and if you ever encounter those people, and how do you actually talk to them?
Yeah, actually really funny. There's this really famous basketball player who's a flat earth believer. Any basketball people here? No, okay. So anyway, yeah, he is an NBA, you know, big star, and he is a flat earth person. And then one day after my talk, he was there and he came over and was like, I love your work. And I was like, yes, and you believe the earth is flat? So it was very interesting. I think it's less about whether science is not doing its job, is more about how people are not really feeling that they are given informations that is trustworthy in general, right? Because if someone's believing one conspiracy, I can put my money there, like they probably believe in a few others too, because it's a sense that you have that is like the information that is in the public sphere are not is for some deeper, twisted reasons to be there, rather than like accepting or like having a method of like trusting the world. So I think it is interesting how, you know, for example, when I talk about like how the visual of the earth is actually like a collage rather than a real picture. So that's kind of like a tricky balance, right? Science, they can be like, oh, actually we never took a picture of the earth. But then if you ever say that, everyone's gonna be like, oh, are we even living on this planet and this is chaos, and like everyone goes crazy. So it is very, very important to like allow complexity in the world. I think we're not educated that way. Like it can go back to science, because science is comforting, as it's always tell us this is right, that is wrong, gravity goes down, and like things like that, and that's what we're taught. And you know, we find comfort in simplicity, but unfortunately, that's the biggest lie. Maybe like everything is complicated. Like we are not used to this kind of switch in the way that we're re-understanding the world. Like everything is statistic, everything is like a likelihood of happening rather than the deterministic of possibilities, right? So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think it's less to do with science, but more about how we're educating each other. Like how do we, you know, make a vow to be like, oh, we're gonna be married, but we're probably gonna hurt each other also throughout the journey, but we can still go through that, rather than be like, okay, when you get married, this is happy forever. Like, you know, we need to break that narrative, like cross-board in society, and that's not the job of science.
Loved it. Happy marriages. Let's talk after.
You said nothing is so simple. It's difficult to explain everything, and I think that leads us to the question to Officina, because you often need to simplify things. You often need to. So where do you draw the distinction? How do you actually decide this is too simple or this is too complicated? And can you maybe use Planeta Praha as an example?
Yeah. Maybe we just partially we answered this in the talk or in the presentation, but the thing is that you have to. Yeah, it was quite intense discussion with the scientists, because they wanted it more difficult. They wanted it more complex. But the people who were present in this project, the audience, were saying nobody can get it. Even we don't get it. Even now, some parts of the, when I see it after 6-7 years, it's so complex. You know, it's not easy. But you have to somehow say, okay, this is like a representation of the complex thing. It's part of the complex problem, and you can simplify it into some kind of like symbol of the thing. So we are working, and graphic design in general is working with symbols and visual, with symbols, let's say. Well, and we are used to it from even like history. We are used to symbols, so we still will work them, because symbol covers more than it's. You can even put some like imagination when you try to translate it or read it. So this is what we are working with.
Yes, it's really a difficult question, and as Marek said, we used some symbolism inspired by Otto Neurath, icon symbol. Yeah, but the problem with scientists always is that they want to show everything. They have so many information, but if you are a visitor that is for a certain amount of time in the exhibition and you're not deep into the theme, have very short span of attention, and you would just in so many information. So the key is to spread the information into different levels, different layers. And the first layer is the interactive part, which is really simplified, really abstract, and it's like an invitation into the theme, illustrating basically just the main principle of the whole strategic plan, of the whole mechanism. And then you have other layers such as brochures with separated parts from the project, and then if you are really interested you can dive deeper into the full material that was showcased in the exhibition. So the key is to put it into the layers as a pyramid.
I think everybody knows, but it's not easy to make a balance. You know, everybody knows that he has to say it simply, but not simply too much, or like not to make it as a, how is it called in English, caricature, or how is it? I don't know how it's called in English. Like it's like a cartoon of the problem. You know, it's not the, it's something which is like a, it doesn't have the content anymore. Like.
Arjan, everybody is interested, of course, about CERN, so all the questions are about it. How is art and science approached and reflected at CERN in general, and how your work with artists is approached by the scientists who are maybe not part of the projects? Are they curious? Is it maybe a tiny fraction of what they pay attention to? How in general is it approached at CERN?
Okay, so I left CERN in 2015, so I'm drawing on the past from that. So I set it up in 2009 and left in 2015. So my experience of setting it up may be very, very different from how it is now. But certainly, oh my goodness, I always say that when you're creating an arts program within a science organization, you will never ever convert everybody into the reason why it's happening there. If you believe that, you're believing, you know, that's a fallacy. That will never happen. You're always going to encounter questions like the one I had, which was, oh my goodness, the artist in residence has been here for a month and they haven't created anything. And I went, okay, so how long did it take you to create your experiment? And then he said, 15 years. And then I said, okay, so why do you think artists do things in so quickly, within a month? And then he went away and thought about it. So you're always going to get questions. And actually, I loved that because it means it always keeps you on your toes as to why art is important. And the way to deal with it is always to question it and throw back questions so that the other person is thinking about it. And scientists love thinking. They don't like being told what to do, but they love thinking and reflecting. So what I would say in terms of the startup, also I met with people who said, oh my goodness, thank God this has happened. Scientists who said that. We've been waiting for years for this to happen. Now CERN has got its own gallery. It's created the Science Gateway Gallery, where it actually showcases art, which is fantastic in 2024. So it shows that art really has arrived and is seen as a fundamental force of knowledge and knowing within the science community. And I hope that spreads further.
I will stay with you. Is there any project that excites you nowadays on the intersection of art and science?
There are so many projects. I think it's unfair to pick up and single one out. So, for example, I mean, just listening to Shu, for example, I get very excited listening to Sasha early this morning and knowing what she's doing in terms of the micro world, and which is so fantastic. There's so many projects. I think it's a very exciting area at the moment, and I really encourage everybody to engage with it.
Perfect. And do we have any? Yes.
Thank you. My name is Maxime. Thank you for your topics. It scares me, honestly. And there's the question about it. Like yesterday, we have the topics about technology and art, and it's, for me, it's so nice that it's like, wow, this new screen is so bright and colorful. Wow, this new speakers are so loud, and that's great. But when we're talking about science, like, wow, this was a few billions years ago, and there's like some questions which starts in my head after thinking about this and touching with this art. They scares me, and there's some different emotions. I think something different from the tech and art. And the question for you, maybe, are you dealing, like, how are you dealing with the people emotions, sometimes hard, maybe fear or so, or maybe when people like really about letters and they like angry on you, like why you tell them that. I think there is some really deep touching topics with it. So how are you dealing with this, if you're dealing with this?
We are optimists.
Yeah. You are teaching, you are dealing with emotions of students. You have to
I am optimist.
It's not easy all the time to stay optimistic. Yeah. I just said it's not easy to stay optimistic all the time. Yeah, but it's important. But how to make yourself to be optimistic? Are you making yourself, or it's natural for you?
Maybe go in nature. So dealing with emotions, I always think if you're scared or frightened, or it brings up such incredibly violent emotions, this kind of collision between art and science, I think just go into nature and engage with the world around you, with your senses, with your sight, your smell, your touch, taste. I think that's so important to get out of your head and out of the emotional fear factor. And that's one way, a kind of grounding way, but it really works. Yeah, that really works.
Yeah, definitely. I would recommend to stop looking at social media. It's something which really scares everybody. So yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's the point. Yeah.
Do you sometimes recognize fear or not knowing what you're doing in your practice? Because you deal with very difficult things, and I think that's a question that arrived from Slido. How often do you feel that like you have no idea what you are doing?
But that's brilliant. Isn't that the moment before you actually find what you're doing? I always think the unknown is what everything is about. That's why we're curious, that's why we're human, that's why we discover. And actually, there's also the positive side of fear, which is the unknown, and we need to embrace that more. I suppose I created Arts at CERN and all the other projects like Earth, Water, Sky in order for artists to go into the unknown, into areas where they weren't familiar, to discover. And yes, there's fear at the beginning. There's the fear of not understanding, not showing you understand. Also, the subject matter can be fearful. The language can be fearful when you hear things like Wimpzillas. I mean, what the hell is a Wimpzilla? But when you go into the unknown, you go further, and it's about curiosity, which again is going back to what Jules is saying, about the importance of curiosity and being open.
I don't really feel fear as much in the projects. I do worry that if I don't finish the project on time, that's a different problem, I think. That's not what you're asking, right? The fun thing about making art or doing research, because I'm also a researcher, I was in MIT for a very long time, is that it is more about asking questions rather than finding the answer. And I think in this world, most people don't have answers. We're just pretending that we have an answer, right? And thinking about things that like one could be like, you know, not sure and concerned and worried about. Like, for example, the project, the Whetstone, I had no idea whether I would end up finding the rockets or not. But just having a team going through all this like foreign landscape is the best, most epic road trip one could ever ask for. And I got paid to do that. Like, what can I even worry about? But of course, the question is like, oh, is this meaningful? Or like, do people get what I'm thinking? You know, that's more about, I think, deep down, is recognition. It's more like understanding. And that is just more about whether I can open myself up and let people in and ask questions. I do occasionally find there are audiences, they are like, oh, this is just, why do you do this? You're trained as an engineer, you could have done so much better to contributing to this society. I don't know, making planes or something. And I think that is a good moment to realize that we're all beings that are having this incredible moment of encounter. Like today, I met people here, either in physical world or in digital world, and you have a whole life that has carried you to arrive here, and I had my version of it. And there are moments that we overlap. That's where we can understand each other. But there are also lives that I have lived, you haven't, or you have, I haven't. And then that's where I might never understand, why would you be angry at me now not becoming an engineer? Maybe that's your, you know, expectation from your parent and your way of thinking. You made sacrifices and you decided this is what you need to do in order to feel loved, versus my way of being, how I can live a life. So that's where I found really, really fascinating about being an artist, because you are often hitting individuals like head on head immediately, and you're getting into a conversation that is the most direct. And I found it's very fascinating, like as like a creator. I mean, I bet you two feel the same way. It's like every choices you make, you can tell in yourself and others' work, like, is this choice out of fear because that's just a standard way to do it? If I did that, everyone gonna be just say, okay, it works, but it's like a just pass choice because you don't want to think too much? Or is it a choice of aesthetic or whatever, the way you install the work, or just the way the materials they're dealing with? It is so experimental, it is something might break or might be confusing for your client, for your audiences, but you want to push for it. Like, I think that is, I love about art, because I constantly have to deal with it and to think about what kind of artist I want to be. And I think that's exactly the same with science. You know, there are scientists who just making incremental changes, incremental improvement, and because then they can publish a paper and get a job and do the paycheck to paycheck life, and that's fine. But there's also scientists who believe in a big idea and they might not be able to prove anything until 20 years down the line. So I think it's just a choice and there's no right or wrong, but I don't know, for me it is just beautiful that I would be able to have a sensitivity to see that in myself and other people.
When I was listening to your presentation, I was thinking a lot about the book Three-Body Problem, and about how one human decision can have a huge implication for the future. And that's maybe a last question for all of you. Do you think about distant future in your work and in your thoughts and in your ideas? Or are you thinking only about the immediate futures?
For the works I do think about what it means to make art now. I don't want to make art that is just because that's my job. I want to make art that is pushing the boundary of art. So in that sense, always is about future, but it's a future that's constantly dealing with the past. I am right now very, very curious about biotechnology. I'm curious about AI, of course, like everyone else. But the question is like one person gonna change the world, and do you want to be the one person? I just never trust that narrative. Maybe Sam Altman would do something with the world because he want to privatize OpenAI, blah blah blah. But like, I don't think he set out to be that person, you know, when he was 5 or something. You know, it is the waves of history, and then people happen to be in a place as they, you know, make choices. And I think for me, when I think about future, is really about how or whether I would be constantly engaging with the most provocative, experimenting, you know, aggressive artist in the world, and having a dialogue with them. But maybe, I don't know, maybe like at some point I'll be like, oh, that's exhausting. I just want to have a nice life, and that's fine too. Yeah.
Ariane, how are you thinking about future?
Well, I think of the future as a capitalist construct. It was created basically in the 19th century and sold to workers as a way of harnessing them to the machine. And if you look at other cultures, they don't even believe in the future. They always talk about the past and the present, sitting with them, moving forward, and the future is something behind them because they don't know what it is, it's unknown, so it should be disregarded. So I really believe in making changes in the here and now and pushing as far as you can, building on the past, pushing and breaking those boundaries. But I would quibble with the notion of the future and say it's been sold to us as a way of making things better if we work harder, like those workers in the Industrial Revolution, which is precisely what happened.
Love this. And last but not least, Officina, what about future and how you are measuring your impact for the future?
Bright. But I think I have...
The optimistic guy.
Yes, but I think, I can continue the previous question and join it with this question. The worst fear is the fear of failure, and we have to learn to not to be feared to fail, because from failure we can learn so much. And if we accept this and we won't fear of failure, we can develop and move forward. And
yeah, I think it's even not to be afraid of not be appreciated by the audience. Sometimes it's not like that makes you free, that you can do something you don't even expect from yourself, but it's difficult. Yeah, and then, but only thing I'm afraid of is a little bit, I'm afraid of the value of the artist's work or designer's work, because it's decreasing instantly, even because of the machine learning and these things, but even because of the visual world is full with images, and this is only, I'm not sure if the audience, you see that everything is shorter and shorter and quicker, because the audience doesn't have the time to pay attention. So this is only, I wish that its audience will be more focused and concentrated on the contents.
I think it's symbolic how our Into the Universe panel finishes with getting back to the ground and real reality happening around us. Thank you very much, Ariane, Xin, Marek, Jan, you were amazing.